but they'll keep joining. So maybe just take it slow for a couple minutes, Jennifer, as you introduce yourself. And then we will, I'll just keep adding people in as they join the call. So welcome to day 2 of our coolest conservationists. And this morning, our first guest is Miss Jennifer Owen-White. And we're very excited to have her here. I'm gonna let her do her official introduction so that I don't mess it up. She obviously knows a little bit more about herself than I do, but we're very excited to learn. And thank you for being here, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. Yay, okay. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Owen-White, and I am honored to be considered as having one of the coolest conservation careers. I definitely think that I do because I am the refuge manager for the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge in Albuquerque. Has anybody heard of Valle de Oro before? Oh, I see some hands. And been out there before? Yeah? Cool. So I really love my job. It is incredible. It's amazing. And the coolest thing are 6 different people. And so as a refuge manager, my life is filled with all kinds of fun activities and surprises, but I also really get to make an impact on wildlife and my community. So I've got a little PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to show you all. So I'm going to start to share my screen and make sure that you can see. Let's see. It's going. There we go. It's being a little slow now, sorry. What I want to start with, what I'm going to show you is a little bit.
Jennifer, your screen froze.
Let's see, can you all see? Can you see my screen now? No?
We can't see your screen.
Okay. Silly. Let's try this again. How about now? You see a picture of me holding a lizard?
It's working on it. There we go. Yep, you're good now.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my history and kind of how I got to where I am, because I think that's one of the biggest questions that people ask me is, how did you become a refuge manager? How did you know you wanted to be a refuge manager? And so I just wanna tell you about how that all really worked for me. Oh, looks like I lost my screen share. Let me try again. Okay. So as I told you, do y'all see a picture of the sign for Valle de Oro on the screen right now? Yeah? Okay. So as I told you, I'm the refuge manager for the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge, but obviously I wasn't always a refuge manager. As a kid, I grew up in Houston, so I'm a city girl. If you know anything about Houston, if you've ever visited, the city is filled with a bunch of canals that we call bayous. And they're really cool places to go hang out and to go catch things like tadpoles and then frogs, to catch snakes, to watch small fish. And so even though I'm a city girl, I really had a great experience as a kid being able to go to the open space and green places in my backyard, and I found a love for reptiles and amphibians. And so when I was in high school, I got a volunteer job at the Houston Zoo, and I wanted to really be put in the reptile house to help take care of the snakes and the frogs. But for some reason, they put me in the education center. And at the beginning of that summer, I was really sad that I was in the education building because I really wanted to help take care of the reptiles and amphibians. But by the end of the summer, I realized that's where I was supposed to be, because I got to do things like hold snakes and teach other kids about them, or oversee the touch tank where people got to touch things like starfish and sea urchins. And so I really loved animals, I loved wildlife, and I really loved telling people about them. But it was time to go to college. And if any of you are getting ready to go to college, you might be facing what I faced, which was I had no idea what I wanted to study. And when I was ready to go to college, I felt a lot of pressure from my family, from my teachers, from a lot of family friends. Because I was good at science and because I did good in school, I really felt like I was supposed to go and be a doctor. And I felt this pressure to be a doctor. And if I wasn't going to be a doctor, maybe I had to also be something prestigious like being a lawyer. And so I felt a struggle to figure out what I wanted to do in college. And I ended up going to Texas Tech University, and I started pre-med. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but I actually do have a TED Talk about this, about how I struggled with being pre-med and then kind of gave up on it to go into conservation. But I struggled for 3 years, all the way till the end of my junior year in college, being pre-med and taking all my pre-med classes and working in a lab, and it just wasn't my thing. I missed being outside. I missed being around people. And I was really lucky this summer before my senior year in college, I got to go to this field station. Texas Tech University has a field station in Junction, which is in the center of Texas. And I got to take a herpetology field course. And that was all about reptiles and amphibians. And we spent weeks that summer just going out every day and catching and identifying and photographing as many snakes and lizards and salamanders and frogs and toads as we could. And of course, that was my first time that I actually got to see and hold a real Texas horned lizard or a horny toad. So that summer was a big deal for me. I realized that I was trying to go to school and follow a degree because of what everyone else wanted me to do. And what I really loved was wildlife. And so I changed my senior year, I changed my degree plan and moved from pre-med to biology. Luckily, a lot of the classes overlapped, so I still graduated in time, but I really felt like I had found what I wanted to do by just studying things like ornithology, the study of birds, ichthyology, the study of fish, herpetology, which of course was my favorite, the reptiles and amphibians. And so then I decided to go get a master's degree. And I was really lucky that in my master's degree, I got to travel. I got to go to the British Virgin Islands, which are islands in the Caribbean, and I studied conservation herpetology. And so the two animals that you'll see on the screen here are the Cuban tree frog, that big frog in the middle. The Cuban tree frog is a non-native invasive species in the British Virgin Islands, and I got to study its impact on the environment. I actually got to document which islands the frog lived on. And so now anytime somebody does research on Cuban tree frogs, they have to cite me because I'm the one who said, oh yeah, they're present on this island, they're present on this island. So that was really cool. I also studied endangered species, and that bag that I'm holding there in that picture is Virgin Islands rock iguana, which is an endangered iguana that we were capturing and weighing and doing health assessments on and putting tags in so that we could continue to learn about them. So I had a ton of fun doing my master's, and I eventually got my master's degree in wildlife, and I also studied museum science. And then I got my first real job, and I started working for Texas Parks and Wildlife. And I moved all the way down to the very tip of Texas, and that started my love of working along the Rio Grande. I worked in the very southern tip of Texas. You can see it on the map there, where the river, the Rio Grande, meets the Gulf of Mexico. And I worked at a place and a series of places called the World Birding Centers. And there are just some amazing birds down in South Texas. And my first job down there was to be a park naturalist. So I got to combine my love of biology and my love of education, because what I got to do was to do field trips for school groups, to take people on tours and teach them about wildlife. I did a lot of birding tours. And so I really loved being a biologist and an educator. And the birds you see here, that really brightly colored one, that's a green jay, which is an amazing tropical, subtropical bird that lives in South Texas. The other one, the brown one below it, is called a chachalaca. And a chachalaca makes, it's called that because of the sound that it makes. And then the one with the really long neck there, that's an amazing bird that I got to see called a bare-throated tiger heron. And when I got to see it, it was the first time ever that this bird was in the United States. And so, of course, as the park naturalist, it was my job to teach people about this bird and why it was so important. So it to be able. Nope. Okay, there we go. It was really cool to be able to help people see this bird that had never been seen in the United States before. After that, I started working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who I work for now. We are the federal agency. I work for the federal government, and we are the federal agency who oversees wildlife here in our country. And under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're in charge of the Endangered Species Act. We help do fisheries work. We help law enforcement officers who help look at import and export of wildlife and help protect wildlife. And I work for the National Wildlife Refuge System, which is this whole series of lands and waters that protect wildlife. And so I started my career as the manager at the Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge all the way down in deep South Texas. So I managed a refuge that was on the Rio Grande, on the border with Mexico, that had some amazing wildlife. That picture that you see at the top of a bridge is actually a canopy bridge through the trees with all that moss hanging off the trees. That was the place that I got to manage. And it was a really cool national wildlife refuge because we got 500,000 visitors a year, like 500,000 visitors a year coming to see the wildlife at this refuge. And I was also at that same time the visitor service manager for other refuges in South Texas, including the Lower Rio Grande Valley National Wildlife Refuge and Laguna Atascosa. And so what you'll see there is a picture of some cool birds called aplomado falcons. And then the coast, because Laguna Atascosa was a refuge that was right on the Gulf of Mexico and a body of water called the Laguna Madre. And then I got the best job ever. I got to be the refuge manager at the Valle de Oro National Wildlife Refuge. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to try to show you all a video to introduce you to Valle de Oro. See if this will work.
We don't see the video, Jennifer.
Is it not showing?
No, we just have, I mean, unless someone else sees it, but it's just a screenshot of a video on the screen.
Ah, let me see. Let me see if I can do this again. See if it'll let me share my screen and just select the video. Okay, do you see the video now?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay.
Maybe turn your volume up on your computer. We can't hear anything.
Can you hear it now?
You can hear it, but it's like super, super, super soft. Like you can't actually hear it. You can just hear that it's making noise.
Diego said that he can see the closed captions just fine, so it's good for him.
So I'll send the link to that so you all can see it. Hopefully you were able to read the closed captioning, and maybe you saw some familiar faces in that video who might be in this group here today. Okay, so let me finish by telling you a little more about my job at Valle de Oro. Do you see my PowerPoint again? Yes?
Yeah, you're good, Jennifer. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is me in my uniform. And at Valle de Oro, I get to do like everything that combines all the things that I've done in my career. I get to be a biologist and do restoration work. I get to oversee major construction of habitats and of buildings. I get to oversee research and education programs and youth employment programs. One of the most exciting things that I get to do is basically plan for taking this old dairy farm that Valle de Oro is and plan to create a bunch of habitats. So we get to plan for creating wetlands and expanding the bosque and creating upland habitats. I'm in the process now of overseeing the construction of a visitor center, and I got to design this building. I get to help create the exhibits that are going to go inside. And now I get to oversee and watch the visitor center construction happen. So my job right now is a great place to be because it combines all the things I love: being a biologist, working with people, providing jobs, making an impact in my community. And overall in my career, working for Fish and Wildlife Service, I've got to work with some really cool animals. What you'll see here is an ocelot. When I was in South Texas, I got to work with ocelots. I also got to work with sea turtles. I got to work and research and band peregrine falcons. Down in the bottom corner, the bird that I'm releasing is a ferruginous hawk. Of course, there's me down in the other corner with Puddles, who's our mascot for the National Wildlife Refuge System, the blue goose. And the picture in the top corner there is actually me in China. I got to go for 3 weeks as part of work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be in China and visit some of their bird refuges and help give them advice on how to work with community members and engage people in bird conservation. And of course, I get to work with a ton of people, and I get to do some media. As I showed you, I did a TED Talk before. I've hosted a talk show. I've hosted a radio show. I've made lots of videos. We've been in parades. That's a picture of us in the Muertos y Marigolds parade here in the South Valley. We've been featured in magazines. And so part of my job is also doing that outreach and that media to help people care about wildlife. And I'm going to end on this one, which is just a reminder to open up for questions for y'all. This is me presenting at an event at the refuge with Senator Heinrich, Dr. Tuggle, who is our head of Fish and Wildlife Service for the Southwest region, and Dan Ash, who at the time was the director of Fish and Wildlife Service for the country.
It looks like we lost Jennifer. Oh, there she's back. We can see her now. Okay. All right, cool. Well, thank you, Jennifer. So it looks like she stopped screen sharing so I can see everybody. Does anybody have any questions for Jennifer? You can type them in the group chat, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, whatever you want. It looks like Max and his dad have a question. You guys can, I think you might have to unmute yourself. I'm trying. Oh, there we go. You're good.
Hello, Jennifer. I remember that we used to see a lot of red-spotted toads down near the river, and I was wondering how the amphibians are doing at the moment.
The amphibians are doing really great. We had built a playa wetland not that long ago, about 2 years ago, and we just put water in it recently. And as soon as we put water in, within about 2 hours of putting water in, the amphibians are going crazy. So we've already reported about 5 species of amphibians who are breeding now on the refuge because of the wetlands we've created. So it's really exciting. As a herpetologist, I really love to see that kind of stuff, and I love to be able to create habitats that will benefit those species.
Wonderful. That was a great question. Anybody else have a question for Jennifer? Anybody? Oh, okay. Go. There you go. It's all you.
Do you have any
I
raptors?
noticed that there are a lot of people who volunteer to help at Valle de Oro. So how often do you have volunteers there? Or like big groups of people there?
Yeah, so we have a couple big events every year, like restoration events where people can come out and plant trees and plant shrubs. We also have our big Build Your Refuge Day, which usually happens in September, where we've had people help us build a trail, or we've had, again, more restoration work. That's a big part of what we do right now. But we also have people who volunteer on a more regular basis to help pull invasive plants, non-native plants, or to help do wildlife surveys, to help do research on the refuge, to help with education and outreach programs. And so we have a lot of opportunities for volunteering. And we like to think of the refuge as a community-based refuge. So this is your refuge. So you're invited to be a part of helping to design it, create it, and build it. We want you to be proud of your own refuge and have the ability to make it happen, and know that you were a part of something big in your community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think Max has another question. Go ahead, Max.
Do you have many raptors on the refuge?
Yeah, we do. Our most common raptor is the American kestrel, which is a small falcon. And it's actually our kind of mascot bird for the refuge because we think that we're kind of like a kestrel. We're a small refuge, but we're mighty. And kestrels are small raptors, but mighty. But we also have things like Swainson's hawks and red-tailed hawks, the ferruginous hawk that you saw me, the picture of me releasing. And so we do have a lot of raptors. And in the wintertime, there are bald eagles that are nesting in the bosque that come over top the refuge, which is really fun to see.
Great question, Max. Any other questions?
Jackson have a question?
Yep. So Jackson.
Do you work with mammals at all?
With mammals?
Do you have mammals?
Yeah,
Mammals,
we do. The main things that we work with right now are coyotes, cottontail rabbits, and jackrabbits in partnership with BEMP, the Bosque Ecosystem Monitoring Program. We look at things like porcupines and beaver. We also do a little bit to look at things like badgers. We've had some mule deer show up on the refuge, so we start to look at those. So we do work with mammals as well. And in my work in South Texas, I got to work with that really cool cat, the ocelot.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions before we wrap up? It doesn't look like it. Jennifer, I want to thank you. I definitely, Yancy and I chose right, saying you're one of the coolest conservationists we have. I kind of want to be you when I grow up now. Very, very cool. So thank you for sharing with us. And are you going to stick around for Lance? All right.
Yes, I will.
Well, we really appreciate you. Thanks for taking your time. And now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Lance Cherry. And Lance, I'm going to let you do your official introduction so that I don't mess anything up, but we appreciate you being here and we're excited to learn about your career too.
That sounds great. So my name is Lance Cherry and I'm the Chief of Information and Education for the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. I was born and raised here in New Mexico. I grew up in the South Valley and was a Rio Grande High School graduate. I spent most of my childhood running around in the bosque. I used to ride dirt bikes a lot and I played football, and that was kind of what drove me. When I got started after graduating, I went off to college with one purpose, and that was just to play football. And so I ended up playing for New Mexico Highlands University. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And in fact, when my football eligibility ended, I played rugby because I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so my dad always taught me what I thought was the most important bit of advice along the way, is that it doesn't really matter what degree you get. What matters most is that you get a degree, because it's a key to doors and it'll give you opportunities that you never thought of or dreamed about. And so I got my degree in communication arts. I really liked graphic design and advertising and those types of things. And along the way was given an opportunity to work in the newspaper industry. So when I started working in the newspaper industry, my first job was with the Albuquerque Tribune, a newspaper that's really no longer here. And I did that while I was going to college, really focused on trying to make a difference by delivering information to people out there. I bounced from there to the Gazette Telegraph in Colorado Springs when I graduated. It was a fantastic opportunity for me, an opportunity afforded only because I was the youngest person to ever win a Society of Newspaper Design Award. And at the time, the Gazette-Telegraph was full of nothing but senior journalists. And that opened a new door for me too. The El Paso Times, shortly after I'd begun with the Gazette-Telegraph, asked me to come out and redesign their newspaper. And so off to El Paso, Texas, I went, and we went and successfully put out a new design for them and a new way of presenting news to the public. But I was a little bit, unsatisfied because I was chasing what my degree was in, but not necessarily my passions. I left the newspaper industry and went into advertising. And it seemed like it might be a glamorous career, something that you get to be in front of the cameras and you get to provide all the art and graphics out there, and just an exciting kind of career. What I found is that it still didn't touch what my real passion was. And so I took some time to really think about what it was I wanted to do. A lot of support from my wife, who always told me to, whatever I did, to make sure that it was something I loved, because you spend a lot of years doing that. And so I realized what I really wanted to be when I grew up was a game warden. I really didn't know how you get there. And so I left El Paso and came home. And when I came home, I started looking for career opportunities. And when you know it, about 2 weeks after I applied, I landed a job with New Mexico State Parks. Now, I will say, I absolutely love state parks and I love the people at state parks. But it wasn't my first choice. That was my second choice. It was my opportunity to get my foot in the door and show that I could mix what I learned professionally with what I was passionate about, which was our natural resources and the great state of New Mexico. And so I worked for New Mexico State Parks, primarily as their marketing and public information officer. I got to see all of the state. I got to go to, at the time we had 31 state parks. They have 36 now. And I got to spend a lot of time out there with people doing outdoor recreation. But again, I was still passionate about the resource, and it was my holding spot to ultimately land the career I really was chasing, which was to work for New Mexico Game and Fish. And so about 4 years in to my career, I landed at New Mexico Game and Fish as an assistant chief of information and discovered it was exactly what I was looking for. The greatest thing about my job is that I'm in the mix of everything that the department does that's fun. I'm always front row seat. And so I work with fantastic, great people. My entire staff is some of the most talented individuals I've ever spent my life with. And along the way, we've been recognized for outstanding work in communication and education. I've had opportunities to be on TV and to create videos and to do all these wonderful things. But in these images, my most favorite thing I ever did was to band ducks. I'm a waterfowler by heart. I love our migratory birds. And so that duck up there, he's not hurting at all. In fact, he just got a brand new piece of jewelry. I say he got his ring from Jared. And we put the bands on them and release them back into the wild. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. The other thing I really love about the work I do at New Mexico Game and Fish is spending time with the wildlife. Each one of these photos I shot myself, and there is nothing quite like getting up close, face to face with some of the great wildlife in our state. Everything from badgers to mule deer to elk. I'm really actually quite passionate about all of them. And I love those opportunities to get to where they live. to hike back into the backcountry and find them and get those wonderful shots that you have an opportunity to do. Now, in my career, one of the great concerns I had was about a decade ago. There was a lot of headlines across the newspapers and on TV and everywhere talking about a decline in hunting and fishing. And that really concerned me, because what I had learned working for New Mexico Game and Fish is that wildlife isn't free, and that primarily hunters and anglers pay for wildlife in our state. And so it was really important to me that I did something very proactive, and that I rallied my team together to be very proactive about finding a solution. It really was about most of you who are on here today listening to me talk about my awesome career. It was that I wanted to make sure you had the opportunities I had, and that you have an opportunity to do the work I get to do that has been so rewarding to me. And so we looked at a variety of things that were causing that, and we knew we could do better. So one of the first things we did was we had shifted our approach to education to hands-on skills-based training. And so getting out in the field and teaching people to do what we do. One of my favorite days along the way has been my opportunity to teach a young man how to harvest and field dress his first pronghorn antelope and feed his family. And it was really important to him. You know, some of the great work that we do in the department and making sure that it continues and letting people know about it. I've gotten to be on antelope traps, and I've got to work bighorn sheep traps, and I've got to do turkey traps, and get out in the field with some of our officers and do ride-alongs and different things that most people don't get an opportunity to do. I have to tell you, bighorn sheep traps are quite amazing because it's a true test of teamwork. You start off with bighorn sheep who are on the highest peaks in New Mexico, and we drop nets over the top of them. To get them down to process and relocate them, we'll use a helicopter to fly in, and they'll strap them up. You can see I have a shot in here of some bighorn sheep in a helicopter in their little gurneys being carried down off the mountain. When they come off the mountain, it's an absolute adrenaline rush. The helicopters flying in close and tight, and the staff are absolutely silent. It's very important you don't stress your wildlife out when you're taking care of them. And so we'll take them off the helicopter, and we'll take them, and they'll get their vaccines, and they'll get checked and examined and make sure that they're healthy and fine. And then we'll move them into a dark trailer so that they don't stress out with the surroundings, and then move them to new locations. It's been key to the success of reintroducing a species that New Mexico no longer had only a few decades ago. And we've successfully put them back out on the landscape. And it's quite an experience to have a team that works in absolute silence, but everybody has their job and their role and gets it done. Coming back to the education side of it, as we worked on that skills-based hands-on education approach, as opposed to that traditional classroom setting, I mean, I'm the first to know and the first to say to you all, I absolutely understand that if I'm going to inspire you to get outdoors and do this wonderful thing that we call conservation, I can't do that for you in a classroom. A classroom's boring. You got to get outside. And so we shifted everything we were doing, and we moved back outside, back where the fun is. And so my programs teach everything from hunter education to fishing. And our fishing education, I'm absolutely dead serious about. It's more about teaching you how to bait a hook and catch a fish and enjoy all the aspects of getting out and fishing. We also do the off-highway vehicle program. A lot of big words for dirt bikes and four-wheelers. among some of my favorite activities to do in the outdoor as well. But we also teach folks how to respect the natural resources and not run them off road and not tear up the environment that we've created. And so these are all very, very important things. For many years, we have been very strictly focused just on safety. And don't get me wrong, your safety does come first, always, when it comes to the programs we provide. But I had a second high priority, and that was just teaching you all the things I know and teaching you all the things my staff knows and making sure that you just have this wonderful opportunity to experience that. I will say, along the way, one of the coolest, most incredible things I got to design and create with my own hands and my own ideas and pull together was the badge that our conservation officers wear today. When I pulled this one together, you know, I really talked with lots of our folks and really worked to understand what it was we were trying to convey. And it was important that we went back to the history and the roots of our department, started off with the Circle Star. But what I love most is that when it comes to our officers, the most important word across that badge is conservation. Our officers are not just typical officers. They go out there and they do hands-on, in the field work to help make sure that our wildlife are plentiful and abundant in the state of New Mexico. And I'm quite proud of the work that we do at our department. And I was very, very proud to create the symbol that they wear on their chest. So I'll drop here on this big piece, which is that, again, the most important thing to me along the way is helping everyone understand and learn those first steps to connect them with nature. One of my most favorite things that we do along the way has been having some of these outdoor expos and doing some of our skills-based camps. And this young lady was there. I was there with her. She caught her very first fish. A lot of times, to keep it fun, I'll grab a first catch and I'll kiss the fish and I'll challenge them to kiss the fish. You get up close and personal and really understand the wildlife. There's nothing quite like it. She wouldn't do it. In fact, she wouldn't even touch the worm on the hook. That was no go. And but it really is about the future generation. It's about you all. And the work that we do every day is really targeted at helping make sure that you have wildlife resources when you get our age and we pass the baton and you become our wildlife leaders. So I'm gonna slip back out of this. And I'll slide back into normal view. And so I really just want to impart that along the way in my career, when I ended up sliding into game and fish, it really was about chasing my passion and doing something that I could do for the rest of my life and not really feel like I was working. More important to me was that when I get old, and I know some of you think I'm already there, and I see you, I see that look in your eyes. But when I get really old, the last thing I want to do is spend the tail end of my life without any stories to tell. And I have tons of stories to tell. I can say this job has been so rewarding. It has given me countless stories along the way. I get to spend lots of time in the camps and teaching folks how to hunt and fish their first times, getting to teach them about all the wildlife that are out and around you, helping them understand that there are keystone species like prairie dogs out there that supply more benefits to everything else than you could possibly imagine. And those are just some of the things that I just absolutely love about my career, and why I think it does constitute being one of the coolest conservation careers. So no matter what you do, get an education. I don't care what that's in. just get a degree. And if you have a passion to do something, then absolutely, positively, whatever you do, go do it. And there you go. So I could
Thank you,
take some
Lance.
questions.
That's super. I mean, I was texting, I'm going to be real honest. I was texting Yancey behind the screen and I said, you know, by Friday, I'm going to feel like one of the most uncool people in New Mexico because every time you guys talk, I'm just completely inspired by all the amazing things that everyone has done. So let's open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for Lance? All right, Hunter. Good to see you, bud.
So if you're a game warden at the Game and Fish, what's your favorite style to go fishing? Like, do you like fly fishing or what?
Well, for me, my absolute favorite is fly fishing. That's what I spend all my time doing. Much like my passion for waterfowl, I carry a lot of that over with fishing as well. And so what I like about fly fishing is the challenge of identifying the aquatic insects that the fish are feeding on and trying to mimic those flies and those patterns and putting them out there. I especially love it when it's a fly that you've tied with your own hands and you've done everything from start to finish. It's also what I like about waterfowling. You don't just go out there and there's just waterfowl. You have to learn how to ID them. You have to learn everything about that species and their behaviors to mimic that, to even have an opportunity for success. And I like that challenge.
That was a great question, Hunter. Thank you. Jackson, go ahead and unmute yourself, bud. I can see you have a question.
Do you like working with people who like hunting or fishing more, or do you not have an opinion?
That's a great question, and I always have an opinion. I like both. I really do, and so in New Mexico. So I talked about that decline of hunters and anglers in the country a little bit. And so what I'm very, very proud of is New Mexico was one of the first 2 states to turn that around, to get rid of that decline. And I think it was because I was able to recognize that fishing really was the first opportunity to connect people, a very open opportunity to connect people to both hunting and fishing. And we put a lot of effort into teaching fishing first. There's a lot of ethics around fishing that you learn along the way. I said I like to fly fish. I also like to catch and release mostly. It's actually very rare that I will even keep a fish, but it's just one of those things. I just like conservationists. I like people who are spending the money to keep wildlife out there for us and understanding their role. That's what's important to me. They're both my favorite people.
That was a great question, Jackson. Thank you for asking it. Any other questions? Oh, all right. Alex and Max, go ahead and unmute yourselves.
So Lance, one of the questions I'm struggling with is a lot of people who are starting a career in something they have a passion in, they seem to have, you run into issues of money, studying grants, the administration side of things. How important do you think it is to learn those secondary skills early in your career, or do you think that's something you pick up once you're out in the field?
So I think a little bit of both. I think the more that you know when you come in, the easier it is to find the funding and to accomplish the things that you enjoy doing most. The thing with administration is that is amongst the most boring of tasks that we all have to deal with, but it is the necessary side of it. It's the accountability to our customers and to our public that we're doing the right things with the money and the funding that they give us. the biggest thing though is I will say careers in conservation are so unique. That's really not something that they teach well in schools. You really do have to learn when you come into the career. And fortunately for all of us on our side, and I get to watch lots of different state government and federal government careers, the one thing I will say on the conservation side is the training that they provide us along the way is superior across the board. Our federal aid coordinators have spent the time to really teach me how our federal grants work, and our administration has invested in me to teach me how our budget works and to help me get the most out of it. And so that's just one of those things that I say, if you're driven to learn some of it, learn what you can and expect you will use it, but it's not the absolute criteria to get through the door.
That was also a great question. Thank you guys for asking. Any other questions before we give our last thank yous and farewells? Oh, yep, Tony, it's all you. Oh,
I don't want to take up too much time. I sent you a private message, Lance. But my question is for somebody getting into like Department of Game and Fish, what is the likelihood of getting a job close to where you already live rather than relocating around the state?
So, you know, that was always a concern for me, and I found that path. I stayed in Albuquerque when I came back and never had to move, though I worked mostly out of Santa Fe. The biggest thing, the career path that does move you, that you just really don't have much choice on, is becoming a game warden first and front and center. Our biologist positions, our wildlife management, fisheries management, my division in information and education is more centrally located with some staff in each of the regions. And so those are great opportunities to come in the door and come to work for us. I will say this: getting your foot in the door is the key. You chase the jobs that you're qualified for, and once you get in there and you start building a little experience with the agency and some understanding of the agency, you will more quickly find the path that provides you the most happiness. And that's how it's been for me along the way too, is that I found that way through. I learned what the agencies do, and then I have landed in the spot that is perfect for me.
Awesome, thank you.
And you can always, and I will say this to everyone on this call, you can always reach out to me at any time. I am in the public information side of this world. So if you're considering new careers or this is a path you want to take, I'm always available to talk about that.
thank you, Lance. Eli, do you have a question, bud? Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Do you have a favorite river to fish at?
Oh, that's such a good one. So, you know, I guess I'm going to have to say my favorite is the Rio Chama. I love that country up there through Chama, New Mexico and Abiquiu. And it's just, every time you're out there, you have such an opportunity. You might see elk and deer walk right into the stream behind you. And I love that.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Thank you, Eli, for asking that question. All right, it looks like Max has another question.
What are your thoughts on bullfrog hunting?
I think that I wouldn't eat them, but I think that's a great way to get into hunting and fishing. At the end of the day, what's really important to me, and in regards to that question and every other species out there, is that if if you take a species, you need to use the species. It's not just for sport. You don't just kill to kill. If you're going to harvest it, then you eat it, and you use everything of it that you can use, and that's important. I think that's the ethics. Well, there's different restrictions across species, and sometimes you can harvest and not have to eat them. I think the best thing, the ethical thing to do, is to always use the entire species. If you take one, you use it.
All right, thanks Max for that question, and thank you Lance. I think we are right at 10 o'clock, so we're gonna call it. And I wanna thank Lance again for coming, and I wanna thank Jennifer again for coming, two of our coolest conservationists here in New Mexico. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all your efforts across the world of conservation. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being available to our community if they have additional questions. And we're gonna call it good, but don't forget, we are here tomorrow again with two more cool conservationists from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and we hope to see everybody back. Thank you guys.
Thanks,
All right.
Jennifer. Thanks, Lance.
Thank you all.
Thanks guys. Have a good rest of your day.